top of the hour, so time to start. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Welcome. Good morning, everybody. Delighted you could join us today on our webinar. We're going to be talking about exporting to Europe, and in particular, some of the issues, some of the challenges looking forward, and notably with regards, anything with regards e-commerce and using digital tools. We have a very intense, action-packed, practical packed webinar today, so I won't take much time off just to introduce a few of the people and our speakers. We're delighted to be joined by David DeFalco, is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Europe and Eurasia, the U.S. Department of Commerce. And he's going to be giving some of the opening remarks for our talk today. And I'm delighted that David could join us and give us this perspective from the International Trade Administration and the U.S. Department of Commerce. Also from the U.S. Department of Commerce, we have James Bledsoe is the director of the eCommerce Solutions Center. So his focus is really going to be on the e-commerce side. He brings with him an enormous amount of information and background and knowledge about e-commerce and cross-border e-commerce, and particularly about Europe. He'll give some slides as well, which will have some really practical help and some really practical resources that you can have. And our first question has just popped through. Thank you very much for the question. Yes, you will get a recording of the webinar and the slide deck if you want it as well. So no need to spend any time taking notes or anything else. Just sit back, enjoy, learn, spend time with us, and put your more questions into the chat box as we go. Our third speaker is Kate. Kate Isler is the co-founder and CEO of a really remarkable company called the W Marketplace, sorry. And Kate's going to show us what sort of specialist e-commerce platforms look like. And Kate is a real trailblazer on this, and also an amazing enabler for smaller and mid-cap companies, U.S. exporters, U.S. American exporters that want to use e-commerce to grow their business. So I'm delighted that Kate has joined us as well. And my name is Susanna Hardy. I'm Chief Content Officer at IBT Online. I'll be sort of emceeing it, helping with questions, and also giving some feedback later on about other strategies for e-commerce for America's exporters. Looking at the European side, I'm also going to be featuring a little snippet of information about compliance, GDPR, and talking a bit about our online global programs. So those are the speakers of the day. So we're delighted that we have you all attending. As I said, please do drop questions in to the chat box as we move ahead. Our agenda, as I said, we're going to be talking with starting off with David DeFalco and then James Bledsoe on the eCommerce Solutions Center. I'm going to give some brief explanations about overall strategies for e-commerce. Kate's going to be talking about specialist e-commerce platforms like W Marketplace, and then we're going to look at some case studies and some compliance. There is room at the end for Q&A, as I said, so I would encourage you. With that, I'd like to hand over to David DeFalco and give us his view from the U.S. Department of Commerce. David, thank you so much also for being with us today.
Thank you, Susanna. So good morning. Welcome, everyone. Just to set the stage here, and my role as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Europe and Eurasia within the Department of Commerce's International Trade Administration. I manage staff both at headquarters in Washington, D.C., but I think more importantly for all of you to know is I also manage offices located at most of our embassies in Europe and Eurasia, all of whom are working to help U.S. companies export to the region. My unit also functioned as the coordinating arm for the Commerce Department's work on the US-EU Trade and Technology Council, or the TTC. Why is this important? Well, the TTC was launched in 2021 and is the mechanism for the US to work with our European allies on a number of emerging technologies to help set the rules of the road and to empower our companies to compete more effectively. The 6th ministerial meeting of the TTC took place in Leuven, Belgium, just last month at the beginning of April. The TTC is co-chaired by 2 European Commission Executive Vice Presidents, these being Margrethe Vestager and Valdis Dombrovskis. And on the US side, it is chaired by the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and the US Trade Representative, Catherine Tai. We happened to be joined in Belgium last month by European Commissioner Thierry Breton because of his responsibility for semiconductors and a number of industry sectors of interest to business communities on both sides of the Atlantic. Now, the TTC has been a top priority for Commerce Department Secretary Gina Raimondo. She's personally engaged and is empowered and told us to ensure it produces concrete deliverables for our stakeholders. The Commerce Department leads 5 of the 10 TTC working groups, but most importantly for this group online today is Working Group 9, which is focused on promoting SME access to and use of digital tools, a working group which I am honored to chair for the US side. The United States and the European Union recognize the use of digital tools as a key enabler for SMEs to innovate, grow, and compete. And we're continuing our work to promote the uptake of digital technologies by SMEs. Several outreach events where SMEs shared their needs and experiences were held during the past 2 years, and our colleagues at the Small Business Administration concluded a related study, which you can find on their website online. After an analysis of these stakeholder exchanges and SBA's work, we've developed, both the US and the EU, a common set of recommendations that US and EU policymakers should implement to help SMEs accelerate access to these key digital technologies. The recommendations cover the following 4 topics. The first, building digital skills for SMEs through training. SMEs can significantly strengthen their online presence and connect with new customers through training on digital issues, such as cybersecurity, digital marketing, intellectual property protections, and standards-related issues. The second recommendation was on transatlantic exchange programs. Transatlantic cooperation can give a fresh impetus, raising awareness of digital opportunities, especially for the least digitalized sectors. Transatlantic exchange programs for entrepreneurs should be encouraged to allow innovation in digital ecosystems to be showcased and to spur SME interest in the digital transformation process. Third recommendation is sharing information on cybersecurity, intellectual property, and standards. A public awareness campaign will be launched by the EU and the United States to ensure that government resources for SMEs are widely available. As part of this campaign, links to government resources will be placed on public-facing US and EU sites for easy access by SMEs, entrepreneurs, and others. And then finally, access to finance. Recognizing the long business cycles associated with developing and using digital tools and the need to improve financing opportunities for SMEs, policymakers will consider methods to expand access to resources on financing opportunities for SMEs and financial innovations to help address digitization challenges. Now, currently, we're developing an implementation plan for these recommendations and recognize that this will be a public-private partnership. It begins with today's e-commerce training. We also are working on cybersecurity tool and resource training for SMEs to be held in late June. We are working on measures such as webinar series on access to finance. And we are publishing and cross-referencing US and EU websites with practical information that the SME community has told us is of interest to them. I would ask that you continue to stay tuned for details because, again, this is just the beginning of the implementation phase, and there will be future programming for the remainder of the year and into early next year. Looking ahead, I hope that you'll participate in our upcoming programs related to recommendations of the US-EU Trade and Technology Council and its SME working group on access to and use of digital tools. Before I conclude, I do want to point and reinforce a couple issues. First, the Commerce Department is here to help all SMEs. So please, if you're not aware, there is a U.S. Export Assistance Center in your state, perhaps even in the city where you're located. You can find those centers online. James Bledsoe, who's joining us today, is a part of that network of support within the United States. And please, we help both here in the United States, and if you have any challenges abroad, we are there to help you in those markets as well. Please do not suffer in silence. Let us know, and we stand ready to assist. And the second and final point I want to note, and I alluded to this earlier, is the implementation of the recommendations is a public-private partnership, and I thank Susanna and her operation for helping us kickstart this process with the wonderful panel of specialists that we have today. But it was based on feedback we got from you, and that's an ongoing exercise. So please continue to let us know what we might be able to do in partnership with our European friends to make your job easier, more accessible, and more successful. So with that, Susanna, again, thank you very much, and the panelists as well. I know Kate and James, but with that, back to you, Susanna, and I thank everyone for joining us here today.
Thank you so much, David, for those introductory remarks. Perhaps just before you sign off, there is just one question. I know we have questions at the end, but there's just one question which I just came in now. Where is a good place to get latest information on the TTC? Is there a dedicated website?
If you go to the Commerce Department website, we do have links there, and actually an email box to my working group with the other 4 that the Commerce Department leads, which are information and communications technology, security. It is export controls cooperation. We have standards in emerging technologies and supply chains. Those are the other 4 working groups that have dedicated email boxes, but all the information you can find will be on the Commerce website. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We'll save other questions for the end. I wanted to turn now to James. James can you heard also from David how U.S. Commercial Service is there to help exporters, and James is a great example of that. So I'm going to pass the mic right over to you, James. Take it away.
Thank you, Susanna. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, David, as well. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. I'll cover how you can grow your e-commerce exports to Europe. And in the process of this, I'll also be touching on the concepts that David talked about with the TTC. And so we'll cover a little bit how that affects those of you in the ICT, cybersecurity, software industry specifically, to include things like the regulation, like the GDPR that Susanna will be covering later in this presentation. And then I'll also cover a little bit on channel strategy and analytics as part of your channel strategy in this presentation to match up well with Kate from W Marketplace, who will be coming on right after me. So without further ado, next slide, please. The main point that I try to drive home with all of my presentations, and if you've seen one of my presentations before, you should recognize this slide, albeit I change the numbers as they change. But e-commerce as a sales channel is growing. Despite economy shrinking, this, that, and the other not really going to plan, e-commerce as a viable option for selling to overseas customers is growing. It is over 25% or a quarter of all retail sales online right now is e-commerce. It will be over 30% here by 2027. So that is a considerable amount of product, services, commerce flowing through online. Next slide, please. Just some quick data points to help orient you as to what Europe looks like as far as e-commerce goes. We've got a lot of AI companies internationally here. We can see on this chart towards the back in the upper left, the United States has the leading amount of AI companies, followed by the United Kingdom, and then outside of that, the greater European Union. So we see here that Europe has quite a few opportunities for those in the cybersecurity and ICT industry. There's quite a community there overseas. And then the next chart we see down to the lower right, the AI readiness index rankings. We see a lot of leading Nordics and European countries here that are leading in AI readiness. So for those of you who are unsure of the markets there for your software, ICT, cybersecurity, AI, DLT product, there is a market there. And that's what I'm here to underscore for you. Next slide, please. The greater B2B landscape for Europe is also growing. We can see compared to global growth, which we see growing at a 12.2% CAGR. We've got B2B e-commerce in Europe close behind that at 10.2% average growth there. And then the UK specifically with B2B e-commerce growing 9% through 2027. So we've got strong growth in sales, growth in business across the EU, and then in the individual countries there in the EU as well. Next slide, please. Getting a little bit more granular outside of B2B though, even though B2B for me is the pie that is e-commerce, of which B2C is a slice of that pie. We see here the consumer spending, indicating the robustness of the B2C markets across the Europe markets. We've got strong consumer spending in the UK, Germany, France, and Italy. Coincidentally, these are also the strong hubs for consumer commerce and intra-European Union cross-border e-commerce. That's something that we in the US don't immediately recognize, being we are a federation of states here. We look to Europe almost in the same way intuitively, but they are different countries. And so there's a lot of cross-border e-commerce going on between the UK, Germany, France, the Nordics, Spain, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of movement in online commerce, both for B2B and B2C in the European countries. Next slide, please. So what resources are available for you to help you compete online and grow your e-commerce sales in Europe? Well, David mentioned the U.S. Export Assistance Centers, and that is how my office will engage with you to help you grow your e-commerce exports. What we do is through those local offices, those local CS offices, be that CS Seattle here or CS Rockford, Illinois, you work with your nearest trade specialist. And from there, we would do things like offer you a website globalization review service, which I'll introduce in a little bit, followed by an e-commerce business service provider directory. And the point of these two exercises that we do with our clients is to help improve that online customer acquisition, be that for the business to consumer retail product or for the architect or lawyer trying to get more of their service representation in the European market, for example. Last year, my office helped over 750 businesses in the e-commerce space, doing outreach with them with educational webinars like this, doing one-on-one counseling services, and more. In addition to this, my office also creates search engine optimization friendly content that we use as learning aids for our clients. Next slide, please. So what do we do with our clients? How do we frame the discussion of overseas international sales? Well, it all comes down to how well you can show up in an international search when you should, but then also how well you indicate you're open for international sales, immediately open for international sales when a visitor arrives to your website. Are you simply there for local domestic US sales, or do you sell to France? Make it clear. And so that's what we walk through with our clients, is making sure that they understand these necessary touch points that indicate to the international consumer and international search bots that this is the website that they needed to come to, and the purchase that they need to do will happen through this website, your website. And so this is a lengthy process that we work on with our clients over several weeks, and introduce them to e-commerce service providers like IBT Online to fix the issues that we recommend that they fix, so we can help them get more international sales. Next slide, please. So this WGR gap analysis service that we do is a search engine optimization service. It does not fix your website. It simply holds up a mirror to your website and allows you to see what not only the international search bots see when they look at your website and its suitability for search, but also what international consumers see by way of international sales welcome mat gestures. So it's a very comprehensive report. Two technical reports are included with it, as well as referrals to e-commerce service providers to help you meet those goals, as well as working capital introductions, if that applies to you and your state, such as the Small Business Administration's STEP grant, if that's applicable in your state. We also deliver these reports and help guide you through the process. And it's a very, very affordable $100 to $400, depending upon your company size. So if you are interested in that, reach out to your local trade specialist, whichever that may be, your local city, and let them know you want to start working with them and work towards improving your online customer acquisition. Next slide, please. So this right here is the SEO content that I had mentioned in the opening slides. This is what we share with our clients through the website Globalization Review Gap Analysis Service, and also outreach like this. And this is our blog on search engine optimization, written in search engine optimization best practices. So if you're looking for a written example of what it should look like, here you go. In addition to it, there are a lot of interesting topics written for you to help you understand things, from understanding e-commerce marketplaces, like our next speaker, W Marketplace, to understanding B2B e-commerce in Europe, which reminds me, next slide. Within the e-commerce frontline library, we have an article on the TTC. So earlier in 2022, we had a focus group that involved our clients from the ICT industry, cybersecurity, AI, technology industries, and they provided said feedback that David discussed there for recommendations for EU feedback. So if you want to learn more about this TTC focus group, find contact information to reach out as well, please don't hesitate to visit trade.gov, find the e-commerce frontline library, and this TTC focus group article to read more. Next slide, please. We also have another series that we are doing with IBT Online, the Grow Your Export series, where we are hosting monthly webinars and live streams, LinkedIn live streams, featuring our CS trade specialist experts to discuss various topics and markets. So if you'd like to learn more about selling to Europe and other markets, do visit trade.gov/e-commerce grow your exports. Next slide, please. Also, we have e-commerce market research available for you. So if you want to understand how business is done or e-commerce is done in the UK or Germany or France or the Nordics, you can visit the e-commerce resource guide here on trade.gov/report e-commerce resource guide and get the e-commerce sections out of our country commercial guides that our US embassies produce each year, and get that information right at your fingertips. Next slide, please. And wrapping up here, we've got the e-commerce business service provider directory on trade.gov. This is our referral resource for the website globalization review service that I covered earlier previously in slides. This is where you'll come to find service providers to help you on your cybersecurity, cyber forensics, third-party logistics. Can we go to the next slide, please? Third-party logistics, sales channel management, and digital marketing to include translation services. And believe it or not, our host here, IBT Online, is actually a featured service provider on this e-commerce business service provider directory. So if you'd like to learn more, please do visit trade.gov/e-commerce BSP directory. Next slide, please. And wrapping up the resources here, encapsulating what all we have for CS, the commercial service. My colleague David mentioned a lot of this very broadly, but I thought I'd put it up in writing here. Everything from our matchmaking programs that we have through our US embassies called the Gold Key or the International Partner Search, on down to our industry teams that we have focused on healthcare, advanced manufacturing, ICT, and more. So if you'd like to learn more about these resources, these greater trade resources, please do reach out to your local trade specialist. And last slide, please. Here's how you can reach out to your local trade specialist. This link right here, trade.gov/commercial services offices US. There, you simply enter in your zip code and will find your nearest trade specialist to reach out to and say, hey, I'm exporting to Europe, the EU, to UK, Germany, and I need assistance, or I would like to export to one of those countries and I need assistance. And they'd be more than happy to help you out. So please do reach out to your local trade specialist to learn more about these resources. Now, I'd like to turn it back over to Susanna, who will introduce our next speaker, Kate, with the W Marketplace, to talk more on channel strategy.
Thank you very much, James. Before I do so, we wanted to have a little poll as well, just to ask people if they had, if they wanted those resources, if they would like to have more about the e-commerce solutions center in particular. If you have an interest, let us know. We can then send you some links and things, and make sure you have James's the web pages necessary. And thank you all very much for being so prompt on that click button thing, and we really appreciate it. We'll be getting back to you. Before I pass on to Kate, I thought it'd be useful just to give an overview to sort of give some context to what Kate's also going to say. I thought we'd talk about sort of just a big broad brush sort of strategies. IBT Online, basically, what we do is we're very involved with everything online. Everything we do is online only. So we're a full stack online marketing company. So we build a lot of websites, a lot of e-commerce websites, and we do the online marketing for that. The point is, and this is something you'll hear from Kate very, very distinctly, is that it's always relative and relevant to the buyer persona, the local buyer in that. We've also designed these online global programs which are relevant, which are applicable to many US states. And so, just as James was saying, that there's a lot of helping hands out there from the U.S. Commercial Service. There's also a lot of helping hands in your economic development agency from your relevant state. So do think about, if you want to have more information, you could let us know. I wanted so that's enough about us. I wanted to highlight some of the big latest trends we're seeing on the online world. Obviously, we're all talking about AI, and we're very excited about that. We're also talking a lot about data privacy and compliance, more and more featured, and I will highlight that in my talk a little bit later on. We're talking a lot about personalization. Just think of, stock photos out. Don't put them in. No. You want personal, authentic, real, a reach out and a very personalized communication with your buyer, especially with e-commerce. Remember, it takes a lot of trust to actually click that put it in the cart and pay button. And that needs to build that trust. You need to build that trust. And the way to build that trust is through a direct relationship with your buyer. And then this whole e-commerce, which I think James has really demonstrated and giving you the stats for, is a feature that we're seeing now being not even a nice to have. It's increasingly demanded from B2C, but also B2B, demanded. Like, I want to buy it when I want on the platform that I want, how I want, when I want, where I want, and so on. I don't want to have someone calling me up. I want to buy it. And so that the e-commerce is really, really a big feature. There are basically, I'm really simplifying here, there's basically two strategies you can use in e-commerce. You can use an in-house strategy or an out-house strategy. Either you're going to build it yourself and you're going to use what plugin you want, WordPress, WooCommerce, Shopify, other ones, Magento, whichever, or else you're going to put it all to someone else. The big one that everyone knows obviously is Amazon. And you can choose which one you want, Amazon or Alibaba, Mercado Libre in Latin America, or specialist platforms, specialist marketplaces, such as W Marketplace that we'll be talking about as well. Any other strategy are hybrids between these two, of building it yourself and renting a space somewhere else. They have pros and cons, each of them. They're very good strategies depending on your resources, your ambitions, what you have in-house, the type of company you are, the type of thing that you're selling. So the strategy has to be right in the beginning, and it needs to have a good time to be thought about as well. Both options, whether it's in-house or out-house, require really good digital tools, really good websites, really good thinking about online marketing and brands. So that's the key to think about then. And with that, really, I'd like to just pass it on then to W Marketplace and to Kate to talk a little bit about a specialist marketplace, a really one that's dear to my heart. I think it's a great one. Hi, Kate. Thank you very much for joining.
Hi, Suzanne. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. And I would say I am a huge consumer of James's materials. I'm a big user and an exporter, and I have used all of their services because James happens to be my trade specialist. And so I'm very excited about that. And what I'm going to talk about today, the W Marketplace is really, we are an accelerator to work with small and micro businesses to really take advantage of the opportunities that you've heard about and really, work across all platforms to really help you evaluate as you increase your investments in e-commerce and really kind of go through that. So we're an accelerator program that really works with you to give you some really practical advice as you're scaling up and taking advantage of that opportunity. And so if we can go to the next slide. We can talk about why e-commerce. And I think we're not going to spend a lot of time because you just heard about, why the huge revenue opportunity there is. The things that I want to really touch on here is, the cost of entering a market, if you enter in a marketplace, is a really interesting, it's low cost. It's a great way to evaluate a market. It's a great way to see if that market fits for you. It gives you access, unbelievable access. And so I think that e-commerce is an amazing leveler, both for small businesses as we go across and look at, how does a small business test a market without a huge capital expense to really understand, is it right for me to export to this market or that market? So this gives us that opportunity. And certainly, the W Marketplace, works with the majority of women-owned small and micro businesses, and we find that 25% businesses that export and use a marketplace and are active on a global marketplace are 25% more successful and more resilient. And so that means any marketplace. So that's a really interesting stat because it is the leveler for small businesses and women-owned small businesses. So just a little plug there. So as we go forward, the next slide. So if we think about that blueprint for export success, I want to take just a second and talk about, we all have products and services that we sell online, but really defining what that product and service is and what problem it solves. And that can change culturally. And so we do, in our accelerator, we do a lot of work in terms of how cultural relevant is it and what problem are you solving in this market. We do a lot of work on, refining that target market and then talking about where to sell. Where does that market, where's that customer already buy? Where do they get information? Because that changes sometimes. And, when we talk about Amazon, as Suzanne said, Amazon only sells directly in 13 markets around the world. So in the US, we tend to default to Amazon, but it's actually not the only place to sell. And if you really think about who your ideal customer is, they may be buying somewhere else. And so you may have to kind of consider that. And then certainly, with e-commerce, there's a lot of how do you deliver a frictionless service? So how do you get it all the way through, as Suzanne said, in the cart, but actually in their hands? So there's some thought to that. So let's go forward. And I'm going to speed through this because I know we don't have a lot of time and I have so much I'd love to tell you. So next slide. So the thing that I'd ask, we talk a lot about and is really kind of going through and looking at your brand elements and your product value proposition by market to understand, what changes do you need to make? What adjustments do you need to make when you go into another market? Because you're probably very well suited in the US and you understand your customer and you understand what your brand voice, but what needs to change or adjust as you venture into different markets with different cultural attributes in those markets. And so we talk a lot about really thinking through that marketing, that brand voice, and how you come across there. And again, with that customer. And so next slide. So if we think about that customer, it's the single most important thing, as Suzanne said, that customer journey and who that is. Because the hardest thing we find for entrepreneurs, and I would say I'm included in that, is to really narrow it down to your ideal customer. Our products and services are good for everyone, and we can think of a use case where people can use our products or services in many different ways, but really thinking through what is the ideal customer and where are they and what influences them is a really key feature of success in another market. So the next slide. One of the really important things you need to do is think about deeply what are the demographics of that ideal customer? Where are they? What is their age? What is their gender? And then think about the geographics. Do they live rurally? Do they live urban? What sort of dwelling do they live in? How would they access your product or service? How will they really utilize that? And then the texture really comes in there, and the really important things are, how do they think about things? How do they discover your products? How do they spend their free time? What's the lifestyle? If you're selling a product or a service, how does that fit into their lives? And that's where you get that cultural nuance, where you really have to look at, what are those people thinking about and how do they utilize things in a different place? And, I can tell you from lots of history, when we think about the way things land and the way people have attitudes towards buying certain things in the US is not shared across the world. And so that's a really interesting, culturally. And I'll tell you a quick anecdote. I used to run Windows marketing globally for Microsoft. And one of the things we always looked at in terms of, how do things land? Do people use Windows in a different way in different countries? And that's a fact. It's the same system worldwide, but people don't use it in the same way. And so that to me was sort of one of those things that it was amazing. It's a universal brand with the same products, the same attributes, but we highlighted different things depending on how our consumers looked at them, how our business uses them, and what motivated them to actually make that step into conversion and buying. So that is probably the most important. So the next slide. That is followed quickly by where do you sell? What's the channel strategy you use to enter a market? And I think, when we think about how do we test the waters, how do we use all the things that James talked about and all the resources that David talked about in terms of Department of Commerce, and how do we look at that? And there are so many things that we can use and that are at our disposal. So the next slide. So if we start with, what are our business goals here? How do we want to reach those customers? What's our brand strategy? How much time and energy do we want to spend? And so that is a really important piece to really get clear about as we go into these other markets and as we look at, what is our potential in those markets? And how easy is it for customers to access? And as James said, is it through our international marketplace? Is it localizing, or is it testing the waters in a different sense in saying, our business goals are to sell and to how quickly we want to grow. And so where are the opportunities in a particular market? And, I have tons of examples I'd love to share with you about success and miscalculations on that. And so, there are lots of ways to go through this process, but really looking at what are your goals and who is that customer and getting very clear on what that means. And the next slide, I would say there's 3 examples that I can share. A partnership is a great way to test a market. So before you go in, we have 3 examples that we've been very up close and personal with. And so the first one is a makeup applier. So Lucinda is she went into a marketplace and she wanted to move to Europe. And, she determined that Paris or to France and the UK were the best 2 places for her to go. So she sought out a partnership and did a brand partnership to see, is her product applicable and attractive in that marketplace? And so she really went in and partnered to see and found that France was a great market for her, and that the product that she had partnered with in that bundle sold a lot. UK, not so much. And so that was a very good learning and a very cost-effective way for a very small business to go in and test a market. And so she used a bunch of resources that we taught her through our accelerator to kind of do that market evaluation. So Anti-Home is another one. This is a Ukrainian entrepreneur who was selling products and shipping them through Ukraine. And as we know that there are certainly challenges with conflict in Ukraine, and so there was a delay. And so she has effectively found a 3PL, which is a fulfillment house in the US that she now uses to ship, and she sells across many markets. So she has her own marketplace. She sells on some of the big global markets, and she's used that 3PL to consolidate her inventory and really come up with a solution that works for her to sell internationally. And so she's a really interesting case. And then certainly in the marketplace. So we market and sell our accelerator program across the world. And so we have really gone in and said, where do we need to enter a market, and done some evaluation there with the Department of Commerce to kind of look at where are our opportunities and where do our customers that would benefit from our accelerator really sit, and how do we formulate that, and then how do we export? And so we've done 2 different models. One, we've exported ourselves, and we've gone into a market and delivered our program virtually and in person. We've also found partnerships where people are doing entrepreneur training and they're using our content. And so we go in and work with those people to leverage our content and complement what they're doing to kind of test that market before we go in and jump in with both feet and say, oh, we're now in this market. And it's been the very, as I say, cost effective and learning experience for us that's really capital friendly so that we haven't invested so much. And the final thing I'll say, next slide, is really to think about analytics here. I hear oftentimes through our accelerator, we've done over 230 companies through our accelerator program worldwide. And I'm often asked, what is the one metric that you can judge success? And I would say to you, there is no one metric. The great news about e-commerce is that you can measure lots of things. You can see lots of data, but the trick here is to really determine what data is interesting to you. And, it tells you a lot about your business. Watch those data. Is it total sales? Is it amount of sales? Is it the number of visitors? Is it, what is that, the metric that helps you, and where do you hearken back to the business objectives and the business goals you've set, and how are you going to measure that through e-commerce? And then really look at, is that bearing out? What are your customers telling you? And is that right? And I will tell you, as an entrepreneur, we've made many pivots and adjustments based on what we see in that data. And so it is remarkable what you can get. And it's oftentimes overlooked because we have so much data. So really look at those analytics and determine what's going to align with your business. And then last slide. So, my final thoughts really, there's so much in 20 minutes to tell you what we do in an 8-week accelerator program. And so it's really, I would say to you, invest time in learning what markets are right for you and listen and gather information. You've seen James's resources. Suzanne's going to share more. We have them. And so there are resources out there to really help you make the right decisions. Stay focused on a few markets. Going too broad, too fast is expensive and can be very difficult to manage for a micro or small business. Really to go in there and look at, what that is, what are your objectives, and stay focused on those markets where you think you can be successful. And then certainly, again, use all those resources. And again, as a consumer of those resources, I can tell you they are hugely helpful and beneficial to our business as we've gone and we've evolved and we've pivoted over time. So I would just encourage you to look through all that and use them. So thank you so much for the time. I so appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Kate. And again, we'd like to just ask the audience as well, if they wanted to have more information about W Marketplace, we could easily put you back in touch. Make sure you have the right email, or Kate can send you resources as we go. If you wanted to, please let us know. As I said, we could, Kate can send you some resources or some blogs or whatever. And I am now going to just really quickly go through my slides and leave a bit of time for some questions. Both James and Kate talked about the buyer persona. And Kate gave that slide about what a buyer persona is in that sense. And when you're looking at Europe, that becomes really, really important. Now, I have taken an example from L'Oreal, a French company who do hair products, and they are very aware. And so I wanted to give you some questions to ask yourself here on the left-hand side of the slide. But here, look at the images here. This is what L'Oreal USA gives and thinks its US audience connects with. In the next image, this is L'Oreal Mexico. It's a bit different, isn't it? It's more collegiate. There are men in there. They're gathered around a computer. They're still on the top floor. It's still a business environment. They're on the top floor. Everyone's got great hair. It's just a bit different. And then again, L'Oreal Canada, especially the French Canada one, is a bit different again, reflecting what L'Oreal, as a French company, thinks that its Canadian audience wants to see. So that's an example of a company looking to see and reflecting the international buyer personas in their markets. For that. So I just wanted to give you that as an example. In that sense, what we're talking about is respecting your local buyer persona as much as possible, so that your website is not, this translation is almost irrelevant. Translation is like the icing on top of the cake. Yes, that respects your local buyer persona, but really reaching out and making sure that you are found in that local market and that you are relevant. And as I said, building that trust that you need, especially in e-commerce. And Europe is a sophisticated, competitive e-commerce place. So you really have to make sure that you're getting every single aspect of it correct. And in e-commerce in particular, making sure that it's very relevant to the local buyer. So that means, that the pricing is in euros, that the tax, the discounts are correct, the shipping and order fulfillment are correct, and especially compliance and regulations are correct. That's very important for Europe. I wanted to give you some examples. The first is, these are all U.S. companies, U.S. exporters. The first example is a company that says, I have a strong website and I link it to my shop. That's on the next slide. And this is a company, they make beach sandals, and it's very, it's B2C. They make these rope sandals. They have a very strong, and they market on their existing website, through their website, and then they have a shop, and they manage everything in-house. So that's in-house management. This is not a big company, but as you can see, when we build the website, we're looking at things that really step into them, that is cohesive with their brand and their knowledge base. So that's a strong website. You manage everything in-house and you link it to your shop. Another example we have of that is a company called Oscaware. And this is, I think, is interesting as well, because we do their online marketing, we do their website, their e-commerce, and their online marketing. I think what's really interesting for that is that this is a company that sells on many different platforms. It sells through Walmart, it can sell on Amazon, it sells all, but it makes sure that it has a strong brand via its website, by its own controlled online presence. Because if you're relying on Amazon, Amazon's going to promote its brand. I mean, when you go on Amazon, you don't go on Amazon to find the brand, you go on Amazon to find the product. So really, your own brand is a bit deteriorated through big marketplaces. Specialist marketplaces like W Marketplace, like Kate's example, is not the same. But very big marketplaces like Mercado Libre, like Zalando in Europe, for example, in Germany, you could lose brand awareness there. So this is a company which it spent a lot of time, a lot of effort on that brand management for that, both in the social media and in its websites, in order to make sure that it does not lose brand awareness. And that's also a fully e-commerce website. The next example I wanted to give you is really an example of what we talked about originally, that authenticity, personalization. This is a company that makes things that for manufacturing against rust. Very hard to have brand awareness in a product like this. And yet it's a company that was very keen to say, but we are not just a product, we're a people company. We want our brand to be, we want people to know that we are people behind this, that we are authentic. There's not a single stock photo in that imagery. There's real people behind that. And in fact, they continuously win prizes for cool places to work of that. But it is also e-commerce enabled. Not all of their products are there, but select few of their products are available through their website. I thought that was important. I'm going to whip through the next ones. The next one I wanted to really show you is, and this is a map of Mexico, but they do the same across Europe, driving leads to your distributor. So, having online marketing to drive leads through the distributor is also a form of e-commerce. You're basically selling online, but your distributor is doing the fulfillment of that. You're in charge of your brand, you're in charge of your online space, but your fulfillment is done via your agent, via your distributor. You maintain your marketing. Because for all of these companies, maintaining control over their brand is the only weapon they have against price erosion. and the European markets in particular are pretty price sensitive. The last example, just as a strategy of e-commerce that I wanted to highlight, is something we're seeing really take off, especially for the B2B companies. And this is a sort of request to quote. Again, this is a form of e-commerce. It doesn't end in a payment gateway. It ends in basically in a sales qualified lead, an SQL, or market qualified lead, MQL. So your client goes on and says, I'll have 2 of these and 3 of these, and puts them into a cart, an order builder. It's called an order builder, or a request to quote, or a build a cart. An order builder. So you built up an order that then says, give me a quote on this, and that gets sent to your salesman, who then says, okay, this is this, and here's your specs, and here's your price, and here's the timing, so that the salesman gets that in and does the final part of the transaction, which is the payment gateway and the fulfillment. But all the rest is done via the website, and that is something that we're seeing like a wave coming through, like B2B. This is what we're seeing absolutely again and again. So just highlighting then that sort of website and online marketing tools really help and do that marketing and acting as your sales rep. I want to stop really quickly now and also run a quick poll just to ask of you if you want any more information on the online global programs that we have, or any of the resources that we can send you. If you want us to learn more about e-commerce websites, about online marketing, anything like that, let us know. We can send you resources and put you in touch with relevant people if you have an interest in that. We're very happy to do so. And James also mentioned the STEP grants. A lot of what we do is eligible for STEP grants, as I believe also for Kate, they're probably also relevant for STEP grants. Right, thank you very much for the poll. I said I would talk briefly also about compliance. Again, this is like a wave coming, and you really need to have compliance in front of mind when you're looking at the European markets. GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. Yes, it does apply to US companies. It applies to any company that sells or employs Europeans, people from the EU as Europeans, and anyone who collects any personal data. So if you collect any personal data on any European, it applies to you. And it has teeth. There are sanctions in terms of non-compliance, and they can be large. This is not something you can ignore. It is applicable to you as a U.S. exporter if you're looking for Europe, and it's even if to export to Europe, and it's even if you're employing Europeans in the United States, it's applicable to you. So please don't think that it is someone else's business. It is not. It is really important. And if you have any kind of ambition towards being found on an online space for a European, please make sure that you are GDPR compliant. Again, if you have an interest in that, if you want to know how, that's a whole other webinar, and I'm very happy to launch into that, or we can do some help with you if you want. It is not the mountain you think it is. It is, even small cap companies are doing it. So it really is, something that is achievable for everybody. So please do it. I've left a web link in there, gdpr.eu. What is GDPR? It's probably the best single resource to look at. Right. Next slide. How about that? Takeaways, and I'm really sorry we're running out of time. So takeaways, next step questions. I'm going to really give the takeaways only, and then so I think from David DeFalco, James, Kate, myself, we are concerned and want to make sure that your online assets are working hard for you. It's 2024. You've got to make sure that your online business development tools are really stretched, working hard, getting leads for you, driving you. The best thing about the online is that it's all about your top line. Online means top line. It means sales. So it is really worth doing and really worth getting right. For top line, again, respecting that local buyer persona. Kate had that in her accelerator program with, how do you determine which markets, how, and so on. What are your ideal customers? I gave you the example of L'Oreal as well in France. Respecting that local buyer persona, making sure that you are selling in the place they want to buy, in the way that they want to buy, all of that, making sure that it's there. Otherwise, the world's just too competitive in this. It's not going to happen otherwise. I think the good thing from the ITA, and you heard also from David DeFalco and also from James, exporting can be tough. E-commerce can be tough. You don't have to do it alone. There's a ton of help. There are big helping hands out there. Kate also mentioned she uses commercial services a lot, and James is her ITA. So, get check out the trade.gov, and for the e-commerce one, e-commerce grow your exports is the one that we do as well with them. But the trade.gov resource has just a ton of resources for it. And if you're interested in the specialist marketplace, W Marketplace has a lot of resources as well as its own accelerator program for smaller companies who are really just starting out. And it's a great way to get your feet wet and get in. Finally, we have also our online global programs, which, and we have a ton of information if you go to our website, ibt.onl. There are lots of resources that you can download there for free. You have all of our contact information there and our emails. So please don't hesitate to get in touch. I realize we're 2 minutes over the hour, but we've got a lot. We've said a lot in this. I want to leave you with one last thing as well. We do have a dedicated webinar coming up in about a month's time, I think, about Europe, only Europe. And that will be in selling online in Europe as well. So if you have an interest, you will get an email. And so please keep an eye out for that. There's lots of questions that you put in. We're very kind and appreciative of those questions. We'll answer them individually via email rather than take up more of your time. I want to give a big thank you to David DeFalco, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Europe and Eurasia of the U.S. Department of Commerce. James is always a delight to have on any webinar. James Bledsoe is the Director of the eCommerce Solutions Center. And of course, Kate Isler is the co-founder and CEO of W Marketplace. And myself, want to thank all the audience and all of you for participating today. Thank you all so much. Happy exporting to Europe, and see you on the next event, live stream, webinar, or in person. It would be a delight always to see everybody in person. Thank you all so much for attending today. Bye-bye. Thank you.